In the 40s and 50s across the region, cooler to the east, warmer to the west, and the wind anywhere between 20 and 40 miles an hour. That puts our wind gusts anywhere between 40 and 50 miles an hour. Back into the mid-20s as we go into Saturday morning. And the next big thing will show that we do fall into the upper teens and low 20s for tomorrow morning. Bit of a cooler start, and then going into Saturday afternoon, we keep that cooler trend around. But there will be some rebounding temperatures by the end of the weekend, and that will set us up for precipitation chances for next week. We'll time everything out and let you know what to expect coming up in just a few minutes, Sam.
Tyler, thank you. We are continuing to highlight women-owned businesses in our area during Women's History Month, and today we're joined by the owners of SIOUX Salsas. I know sometimes I could probably mess that one up, but Marcel and Patricia joining us this afternoon. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
So can you all first explain about the introduction of your business and how this first got started for both of you?
Yeah.
This is starting on the market, the
Brandon Farmers Market.
Yeah. So this is opportunity for support Marcela and the car, but so what and the sorry, you continue.
Yeah, so we got our start there, and before that, so my mom is known for her salsas, and so we were asked by the Brandon Farmers Market leader, Julie Lanu, to come out, and she was to sell her salsas, and so that's kind of how we got our start at the Brandon Farmers Market. Started with a couple of salsas, expanded with a few more salsas, added some tamales. Our first retail location was at Cherry Rock Farms that same summer, and then just within the last 4 months, we've expanded into Sioux Falls retail locations, including the Sioux Falls Food Co-op, Pomegranate Market, and Looks Marketplace.
And you all first started in 2020 around that time. Can you kind of walk us through, you know, those initial moments? Obviously, that was a very tough time in our, history, recent memory to start a business, but you all are here now and growing and expanding.
Yes, so in the middle of what we thought was the pandemic, still continuing, but we've found so much support and so much traction in this, and so that's why we've continued with it. We've taken steps that have allowed us to grow and flourish, with our community as well. We try to source locally when we're able to. Obviously, with our short growing season here, it's kind of hard to do that. Certainly, some products we're not able to get into, but we're so grateful for the opportunity to continue to connect with our customers. And a little bit about our mission statement is that we want to just teach people about the complexities of true authenticity and how varied the application of salsas can be. And so that's how we grew up eating, our salsa on food. So before, even when people pray, so you pray before your meal, like a little blessing to your plate, you bless your plate with your salsa. And so that's kind of what we grew up doing, and that's what we want to bring to the community. And
people are still getting to see this, and you are expanding, which is great news as well too. A food truck that will be able to cater to more people, I imagine.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's getting built out right now by Seaside Auto Body. So we actually purchased a truck summer of 2020, blank slate, been slowly adding equipment from everything that we've earned so far with our sales. And so it's been a journey so far, and finally, before the summer starts, we'll have our kitchen on wheels where we'll be able to prepare our salsas during the week and sell food during the weekends. So.
Well, we hope to see you all soon. Maybe I might getting a little ahead of myself. Maybe Fridays on the Plaza, we might get to see you. Hopefully.
Hopefully.
We'll see if things work out that way. Thank you all for popping on here this afternoon. We'll be right back after this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The I-Team digs deeper.
There is an air raid siren that goes off. Everything pretty much stops. The buses, the mass transportation stops. Some people go to shelters and then they wait for the all clear. So they really haven't had a chance to absorb it. But I will tell you, if it means that this stops the indiscriminate bombing of their loved ones, their friends, of buildings and infrastructure, I would absolutely tell you that they welcome this. But here's the sentiment here as I've been speaking to people in Lviv. They don't believe anything that comes out of Putin's mouth. They think he's a liar. What former Senator Chuck Hagel just said to you in the previous segment, they know that he is a minister of disinformation and that he is very good with that. So I think that what they're doing is taking a wait and see attitude. The mayor, just day before yesterday, said to me and on our air, and these are his words, he said, Putin equals Hitler, and that what the Russians were doing were equal to what Nazis do, the indiscriminate killing of people. So I think they will believe it when they see it, but they don't believe anything that comes out of Putin's mouth or any representative of Putin and the Russians and the Kremlin. But I will tell you what this will do if they indeed do draw back. The people of Ukraine will see this as a win, and this will only strengthen their opposition to Russia and to Putin. So this will be a win for them, strengthen their resolve, but they're taking a wait-and-see attitude as of now.
As they should, because in the meantime, the bombings continues and you know, it potentially could even get worse. Let's see what happens. Don Lemon, thank you very, very much. An important note to our viewers. Don, of course, is going to have much more later tonight. He's live in Ukraine on Don Lemon tonight, 10 p.m. Eastern, only here on CNN. Joining us now to discuss what's going on, the UNICEF spokesman, James Elder. James, thanks very much. As all of us know, your organization does amazing, wonderful work. And UNICEF now says more than half of Ukraine's children, this is hard to believe, but more than half of them have already been displaced from their homes since this war started a month ago. It's more than 4 million kids. How do people watching at home even begin to understand the level of trauma so many Ukrainian children are facing now?
Well, it's very hard to, because as you say, 1 in 2 of all children, and when we say displaced and fleeing, as you know, Wolf, we're talking about children who came under fire. We're talking about children who fled to a bunker, or maybe didn't make it to a bunker. Maybe their mum had to lie on them as they moved that way. We're talking about children who farewelled family members, who sat with their dad, who explained why he wasn't coming with them. We're talking about children with wounds of war, and we're talking about kids who are leaving and going to where you are in Poland. So this type of trauma continues until the bombing stops. There are things we do as UNICEF to try and mitigate it, but it's very, very difficult until we see something like a political solution for these kids.
What are the most immediate needs right now that these children have?
You know, first and foremost, it still is for safety. You know, when I today was in bunkers with pregnant women and women who've just had babies. They're going downstairs to bunkers at 3 o'clock in the morning, some of them with newborns, and some of them are leaving their babies in incubators because they can't go. So first and foremost, it's safety, Wolf, and then secondly, it's traumatic support. We need to make sure we do everything we possibly can, and that's about getting kids some sort of normalcy, getting them a little bit of schooling, anything online. But it's protection. First and foremost, these kids need protection from the war that keeps raging around them. I know we seem like we've heard good news today. I haven't met many Ukrainians who feel that. They wake up every day and there's another horror story from a family member somewhere in a city that is still under siege.
The White House says President Biden will be meeting with Ukrainian refugees tomorrow while he's here in Poland, and he's pledging to welcome up to 100,000 Ukrainian refugees to the United States. How does he actually meet that goal? What more do you think he can do?
Look, gents, I just spoke to the military. I'm just doing look, I think what the US has done so far in opening up doors for refugees is so critical. This is about many more countries than just Poland showing a big heart and big hands. Countries have to lead by example to try and support what is millions of people who didn't want to leave their homes, millions of people who want to stay in Ukraine, for whom this, as I've heard time and again, this is their home, this is their dream to be here. Whilst that's not the case, Wolf, any country who offers either fiscal support or, as I say, literally opens their doors and puts themselves in the shoes of these people on this treacherous journey just for a few minutes will understand that, you know, there's got to be deeds to support the words in terms of welcoming so many people who really want to stay in Ukraine.
The UNICEF spokesman, James Elder, thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for all that UNICEF does. We are so grateful to you and to UNICEF. Thank you. There's more breaking news we're following. We're live here in Warsaw. We've got new information on the war that's going on right in neighboring Ukraine. Also breaking, another story we're following. The House January 6th committee back in Washington is now to be considering questioning the wife of the U.S. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. We're getting new information. Stay with us. You're watching The Situation Room. We're live from Warsaw.
Okay, thank you. We'll do one more question before we close. It's from Brett Wright. He asks, Germany and other European Union nations are refusing to cut off oil and gas supplies from Russia right now. It seems that what is at stake is comfort for Germans and others and the strength of their economy, while what is at stake for Ukraine is a matter of life and death. What is your opinion on this?
I'm very clear, said about it in my statement. I think the people who still think that it's possible to buy the comfort life, to pay on the price of the blood children and blood people in Ukraine, very soon understand that everything which happened in Ukraine. I'm born in Kyiv. I never can imagine that I can see the picture how in the sky of my city will be fire after the bomb and missiles. But now it's reality. And today, nobody in the world, in the Europe especially, can be safe. And I think, I'm sure, to see the 100,000 Germans in the street of Berlin, they clearly understand that it's possible happened in the sky of Berlin, of Düsseldorf, of Hamburg. And I think if the politics not already understand, the people push them, understand it's exact. I'm sure about it. And about the position, you know, the President Zelensky very openly and very clearly said about the position of some countries. And in his speech in different parliaments, plus absolutely openly he said yesterday in the summit of NATO and in the summit of the EU, exactly listed all the members countries and give their position. Yesterday, all the Europe listened what position occupied their governments. And the people in the world already made their decisions about Ukraine, about support, about this war, and about that Ukraine is the part of the Europe.
Mr. Yermak, thank you very much for that answer. Thank you very much for your time. And thank you very much for providing an example of leadership that inspires people around the world. And thank you all for tuning in. We'll be doing more events on Ukraine and Russia's unjust war in Ukraine next week.
5 Ohio Republicans participated in a debate in Cleveland.
1-800-883-8200.
I love a great cup of coffee in the morning. I love to just look at the sun and say, thank God it's sunny and not raining, because I hate the rain. And that's it. And then get all dolled up for dinner, and that's it.
Oh, yeah. Jessica, what is your, vacation, primary?
It varies, which I know is kind of a cop-out here, but I do like to sleep a lot. And I actually,
I just had a baby. That's
you could do that at home.
No, it's different. Hotel sleeping is the best sleeping. It just is. There's something about it.
Yeah. Sleeping on the beach.
But the touring is great because you have to. You can learn.
Today, after a historic week on Capitol Hill, Democratic Senator Joe Manchin, who hasn't always backed the Biden agenda, says he intends to support Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's nomination to the Supreme Court. So it seems all but certain she will be confirmed, even if few, if any, Republicans support her. But it's hard not to think their politically minded questioning this week gives us an obvious glimpse into what their midterm strategy will be. This from the New York Times today. Some conservatives tried to put pressure on Manchin to oppose Judge Jackson, pointing to what they claimed was a record of leniency in sentencing child sex offenders and charging that she was a liberal activist on abortion rights, which Mr. Manchin opposes transgender rights and matters of race. But Democrats and others debunked the sentencing claims as distorted, and Mr. Manchin seemed to dismiss them as well. We are back with Danielle Holly-Walker and Reverend Al Sharpton. Reverend Al, let's just talk about what the Jackson hearing tells us about the upcoming midterm battles, issues and stereotypes they repeatedly try to tap into here, portraying Democrats, portraying Judge Jackson as being soft on crime, bringing up abortion and racist baby books, trying to victimize themselves, invoking previous Supreme Court hearings. Any question what the midterm fight is going to look like after what we watched this week?
Very clear that they're going to use all kinds of dog whistles and probably just straight out racially charged whistles. When you try and ask a Supreme Court nominee about critical race theory, when you try to criminalize her by saying she's soft on crime, which is always a stereotype they put on blacks, that we're either criminals or that we are somehow company criminals or we're in co-conspirator. You would think this woman was one that was in some kind of way an accomplice to criminals getting out of jail. And this is how they're going to play the midterm elections, that they're criminals, that we've got to deal with critical race theory. They're doing it all over the country. I must say, though, Alicia, that one of the ironies, I guess the minister side of me comes out when I hear that the Republicans may not vote at all for her, and there'll be a 50-50 tie with Manchin now saying he would vote. It would seem to me almost providential that the breaking of the tie would be the vice president, who's a black woman. For history to say a black woman broke the tie to seat the first black woman on the Supreme Court is something that I would take note of.
There'd be an image to behold, one for the record books. Dean, we heard from Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell yesterday saying he cannot and will not support Judge Jackson, tried to connect her to far-left groups, to far-left agendas. Yesterday, there were Republicans getting Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall to testify against Jackson, and he said, without citing any evidence, that she would use her position on the court to make fundamental redesign in our criminal justice system. Your thoughts?
I think it couldn't be farther from the truth. I think anyone who watched the confirmation hearings this week saw that Judge Jackson is a brilliant judge, someone who is extremely well qualified for this position. She explained in very reasonable terms, even when she was asked many questions that had absolutely nothing to do with her current role as a judge or what she will do as a Supreme Court justice when she's confirmed, about things like being soft on crime or critical race theory. Some of the senators, like Ted Cruz, didn't even attempt to draw a connection between critical race theory and her work as a judge or her future work as a Supreme Court justice. So I think even though many of these criticisms are not tethered to reality at all, the truth is they are a proving ground for what messages will work in the midterm elections. And we are seeing potential presidential primary contenders test out lots of messages for 2024. But Judge Jackson has performed in a way that I think deserves bipartisan support. She got 3 votes previously in her previous confirmation, and she should get even more this time, but unfortunately, she's not likely to, probably just a few Republican votes, if that many.
Reverend, I love the point that Danielle raised, which is like they didn't even do the theater of trying to connect the dots between their grab bag of grievances and her judicial record. They just were trying to get clips that they can then run and play for their base. And the problem is just not that what that means for Judge Jackson. It's not just what it reveals about the Republican Party. It is what it means institutionally. I want to play something that Democratic Senator Mazie Hirono, who questioned Judge Jackson this week, said today on MSNBC about the importance of a bipartisan vote. Take a listen.
Much as I would like to have a bipartisan support for someone as well qualified and respected, with a broad support from the political spectrum, it would be good to have bipartisan support. But if the Republicans basically for political reasons won't support her, then we are going to move forward to put this person on the court because she will make a huge difference to millions of people in our country.
Here's the thing, Rev. There are questions about faith in institutions, meaning faith in the Supreme Court. There are also questions about faith in Congress, faith in the Senate. What does that tell us about the status of the state of the Senate, that this is even a question?
I think it tells us that many people are beginning to lose faith that this country has the top body in the legislature, the U.S. Senate, that everything comes down to party lines and race tinged at that. They were not talking to not only connecting critical race theory to her, they weren't even talking to us. They were talking to their base, their potential voters if they run in the Republican primaries, and they have no care at all about trying to be logical or protect something that we should be looking up to, and that is a seat on the Supreme Court. If they were taking the separation of powers seriously and respecting the power of the Supreme Court, would you be going through this kind of performative kind of behavior and taking away the dignity of the court by questioning things that have absolutely nothing to do with her ability to be a justice and has no connection with her background at all? It shows to them this is all petty politics, and they don't even take the Supreme Court or the Senate seats seriously. And that's a sad commentary, and we wonder why people are losing trust in government, because those that are governing has broke the trust of the American people.
Danielle Holly Walker, such a privilege to have you on the show. And Reverend Al Sharpton, I will see you 5 p.m. tomorrow, as I do every Saturday and Sunday. Thank you for spending some time with us. We're going to be back after a quick break.
Okay. Kilmeade. Oh, it's good, though. It's good. And then we got Cat Tires. This is a fun, fun show. Let's do something new.
Here I am, right where I belong.
Uninsured is ending in early April, that it is going to reduce the allocation of monoclonal antibody treatments by states by some 30%, and also that it requires a scaling back of planned purchases of preventative treatments for immunocompromised people. Your thoughts on those projections and that funding bill?
Yeah, I want to, first of all, reassure the public that if you need to get a test today, you can get a test today. There are people that have the tests. You know, hopefully you got your free test from the government. If you didn't, please, you can still get those. So, you know, there isn't a today crisis, meaning this week, maybe next week, in terms of being able to get the test. If you need to get vaccinated, there's enough vaccine out there, enough people giving the vaccine out there for you to get vaccinated. So for you people who are unvaccinated, please don't use this as an excuse to not get vaccinated. We can do that. The federal government has also assured us that they have enough vaccine in reserve for that subsegment of people who have really bad underlying autoimmune diseases, chronic diseases, you know, bad kidney disease, heart disease, lung disease, that might need a 4th dose. There is a group of people that we have said, small number, that are eligible for a 4th dose. They tell us they're fine with that. And if we decide to improve vaccines for kids under 5, they can probably eke out enough vaccine for that 1st dose for their kids. Having said that, there are many things that are going to go away. Funding for covering people who are uninsured, some of the tests. You know, there are many of these tests that we have, many of the therapies that we have are in very short supply. The raw materials are in short supply, and we really don't have big stockpiles of these new monoclonal antibodies. By the way, there's really only one right now that works very well on this 2nd variant. We don't have enough of that supply. We don't have the money to buy enough of that. I'll have to read the name of the thing because it's one of these words that you know is Bebtelovimab. Is I'll spell it Bebtelovimab.
And thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
That's okay. Tony Fauci even has trouble pronouncing it. It's the one monoclonal that actually seemed to work on this subvariant. but all the others don't, and we don't have enough of it. We also have 2 antiviral agents, Beloved and Molnupiravir, and those 2 are oral agents. They're very good at reducing the risk of people getting really sick and dying, but you got to catch it really early. We don't have a lot of that either, and they don't have enough money to make sure we have stockpiles of it. So I think the way to think about this is that while we have enough for the next, for the kind of the tests and the treatments for the next few weeks, we're not building up any kind of stockpile for any kind of modest surge we might have in a couple months, and we're absolutely not ready for the fall. And what we learned over the last 2 years is the need to have the money to build a stockpile. And if we don't buy it, someone else will buy it.
It's exactly the same. So people just need to be really, really cautious if they're going to enter into that crypto world.
The Better Business Bureau says another way to protect yourself is if someone sends you a link to an alleged crypto app, but that app is not available on the Apple or Google store, do not download it. And coming up at 6, we'll learn more about the threat that crypto ATMs present. Andrea and Beth?
Thank you for that report. We are taking a look at the weather forecast now. It's nice to see those buds on the trees finally starting to develop. Spring is on the way.
Yeah, it is. And it's warmer today, at least in some spots, but we're also dealing with that really strong wind, and hopefully those buds aren't blowing off the trees. They're probably not big enough yet. But, you know, look at some of these maximum wind gusts that we've had across the area, 50 miles an hour or greater, including the Sioux Falls vicinity, where maximum wind gusts today, 53 miles an hour. So we still have a wind advisory in effect for eastern parts of South Dakota on into Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska through the next 2-3 hours. Wind speed sustained right now at or above 30 miles an hour in many locations, and the gusts are, we still have that 53 mile an hour wind gust in Sioux Falls here latest, so that's our highest for the day. So it's really strong still right now, but the good news is that wind will be diminishing. So about an hour, actually right now it's showing 27 miles an hour, but
75-inch TV in there.
Plus, if the weather is nice, fans can cheer on the Coyotes from the patio.
We just want to give people a home away from home to hang out with other USD fans and have some fun.
In Sioux Falls, Sarah McDonald, KELO News.
There'll also be live music once the game is over. Slattery's says JJ's Axes and Ales will also be open.
Well, tonight on KELO TV, you'll be able to watch the regional semifinals in the men's NCAA tournament, and that means we have some programming changes. KELO News at 6 will air at 5:30 p.m. Central Time today. It will air again on KELO Extra at 6 p.m. KELO News at 10 will air on time on KELO Extra, and then later on KELO TV after the games on CBS.
It's like hurricane wind out there.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
That's why my hair looks so messy today. I'm sorry, folks.
It doesn't look that.
Oh, go ahead and run with that excuse. We've had wind gusts over 50 miles an hour during the day today. And even within the past hour, we're still getting wind gusts over 40 here in the Sioux Falls area. Lots of sunshine, though. And it's too bad we have all this wind because it's actually fairly nice and warm out there. 51 degrees right now with that sunshine in Sioux Falls. The northwest wind at 34. That's the average wind speed.
See it firsthand like I have in other places. They will not let me, understandably, I guess it, cross the border and take a look at what's going on in Ukraine.
But pledging continued U.S. support just one day after a $1 billion humanitarian commitment.
We must have to continue to scale up that assistance.
While his national security advisor made clear that this remark.
If chemical weapons were used in Ukraine, would that trigger a military response from NATO?
It would trigger a response in kind.
Did not mean the U.S. would consider its own chemical weapons use.
The president said publicly a couple of weeks ago that there will be a severe price if Russia uses chemical weapons. And I won't go beyond that other than to say the United States has no intention of using chemical weapons, period, under any circumstances.
And Wolf, tomorrow here in Warsaw, the president will keep the spotlight on those refugees. More than 2 million have flowed into Poland over the course of the last month. but he will also give what his aides are calling a major address, an address designed to hit at the urgency of the moment, the stakes that are currently at play here, try and get the message out to the world that Western unity, which we've seen over the course of the last 4 weeks, must be maintained for the weeks and months ahead, Wolf.
Most certainly must. All right, Phil Mattingly reporting for us. Thank you very, very much. We're watching all of the developments. I want to go live to the Ukrainian capital right now. CNN's senior international correspondent Fred Pleitgen is on the ground for us in Kyiv. What are you learning, Fred, about this halt, apparent halt by the Russian military on the Ukrainian capital?
Well, we've certainly seen in the past couple of days already, Wolf, that the Russians seem to be having trouble around the Ukrainian capital, and that the Ukrainians themselves were going on at least limited counter-offensive. So it certainly seems to have been more difficult for the Russians to try and press any sort of offensive operations here in the capital. That doesn't mean that the situation here in Kyiv is not one that remains dangerous. There certainly were still a lot of air siren alarms today, a lot of outgoing, what we believe to be surface-to-air missile activity also. But if you look, for instance, towards the east or east of the Ukrainian capital, the video that we're seeing actually right here is a village that's about 35 miles east of the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv, and the Ukrainians now say that they've won that area back. And that's a pretty big victory for them, because that pretty much would make it impossible for the Russians to encircle the capital. And the same is also true on the northwestern side of Kyiv, where the Ukrainians say they still control about 80% of that suburb of Irpin, even though they are being shelled there by Russian forces. So on the whole, the Ukrainians believe right now, Wolf, that they have the Russians here in Kyiv at least on the back foot, and that indeed the Russians right now can't make any offensive moves towards the Ukrainian capital. Nevertheless, the Russians still threatening the area around the capital. What we had, for instance, today was the Russians saying that they hit the biggest fuel depot that the Ukrainians still have left with a cruise missile, big plumes of smoke seen south of Kyiv, Wolf.
Yeah, I will watch that very, very closely. We're also getting, Fred, the first video from inside that Mariupol theater, where hundreds of people were simply sheltering from Russian attacks. They were actually targeted in a brutal airstrike. So what are you learning about their fate?
Yeah, I mean, it is really a terrible strike. And first of all, if our viewers to look at this, look at the people who are trying to escape from that building after that strike took place. A lot of those people that you see on that video now are women and children. Of course, we know from the authorities there in Mariupol that a lot of the people who were hunkering down in that place were indeed women and children. And the numbers that they give out is they believe that 300 people were killed in that strike. They weren't actually on the scene themselves to verify that. They just talked to a lot of witnesses and a lot of people who knew what was going on there. And they say in the end they believe around 300 people were killed. 600, they believe, who were hunkering inside that theater survived that bomb attack. They say that most of the people who were hiding on upper floors were killed, because obviously the upper floors got more of that ordnance that was dropped on that building and saw more destruction. But in total, of course, a horrific incident. And one of the things that we always have to point out when we talk about this incident is that satellite images clearly showed that that theater, that building, had the words children in Russian language in very large letters written both in front of the building and behind the building, very clear for any Russian pilot flying over that building to see, Wolf.
Yeah, clearly they didn't care if there were children there. Fred, stay with us. I want to bring in the former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, CNN military analyst, retired General Wesley Clark. Also with us, CNN contributor for Russian affairs, Jill Doherty. General Clark, the suspicion was Russia would try to topple the capital of Kyiv, would try to get rid of the President Zelensky. Is this a major revision to Russia's military goals, an acknowledgement that Putin hasn't achieved what he wanted?
Well, that's right. He hasn't achieved it thus far. And they're going to paint the best picture they can, and they'd like to deceive us. But, you know, Wolf, in war like this, we've got to be very careful about listening to what the enemy says. We've got to be careful about looking at the situation on the ground. Here's the way I'm seeing it. The Ukrainians have counterattacked successfully. They pushed the Russians back. The Russians are still dug in. They've still got artillery. They're still reinforcing themselves. They can't advance. How much more power do the Ukrainians have to finish the job against those Russians? Can they surround them and annihilate those Russian forces north and northeast of Kyiv? Can they then go to Kharkiv and force the Russians out of Kharkiv area? If they're going, that's what it's going to take to succeed. So we're a long way from being done in this, and some of the best Russian forces are in Donbass.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. You know, Jill, Russia says the main thing now is to, quote, liberate eastern Ukraine. How do you interpret this? Is Putin so desperate to claim any sort of victory regardless of the reality on the ground?
You know, Wolf, I think that it could be Putin trying to make the case to the Russian people that he has won the war. Because, you know, if you look at Russian TV, that is the only war that the people in Russia are seeing. It's that conflict that is in the eastern part, in the Donbass region. And Putin made the point early on, you know, the reason we're going in is to protect those Russian-speaking people in the Donbass region from attack by Ukrainians. So I think if you say, okay, we've done that, you know, we're protecting the people in the eastern part of the country, and you forget about the other entire side of this, which Russians aren't seeing, which is exactly what Fred was showing, you know, pictures of devastation, civilians killed, etc. Russians don't see that. They see eastern Ukraine. So if you can make that case, we've protected them, then I think Putin could make the case to his own people that he won. Of course, I don't think it's going to convince anybody else, but maybe his own people.
That's a good point. You know, General Clark, Ukraine says, and this is Ukraine, Ukraine says it's going on the counteroffensive, but Russia is apparently bringing in reinforcements from Russian-controlled parts of Georgia. How do you see this playing out in the coming days?
It's a seesaw battle, Wolf, and it's a battle of reinforcements, and we've got to do everything we can to sustain the Ukrainians in this fight, because this is a battle about really the future of the world, whether you believe in international law and the security of countries and their borders, the sanctity of their borders, or whether it's just the most powerful can take what they want. Ukrainians are, therefore, they're fighting for us. Now, I know there are some who would want to sacrifice those eastern provinces in Ukraine and say, let's just stop the fighting, give up those provinces, maybe Russia will stop. So it's not going to work out that way. The Ukrainians want their territory back. The Russians are not going to give in on this easily. So this battle is going to continue for a while, and the Russians are going to throw more materiel and people into it. We've got to continue to support the Ukrainians. They need more support. They still need aircraft. They need air support in there from their own aircraft. They need the Stingers, they need the Javelins, they need the advanced air defense systems, and I think they're going to need some armored vehicles and even some more artillery. This is a different phase of the battle now. They've got to push the Russians out all across Ukraine.
Yeah, and that's not going to be easy by any means. You know, Jill, I want to play a little bit more of that video of that bombed-out theater in Mariupol once again, and it's really painful to see it. Clearly, Putin has no qualms about taking civilian lives, does he?
Apparently not. I mean, you know, I was watching Russian TV just a few minutes ago when they were showing a statement by a Russian official who said, we are being very careful. We're destroying only the military targets, not civilians. But this is so obviously not the case. So, you know, they can make that point, but it really is devastating. I think that is one reason, obviously, that Russians at home watching state TV are not seeing it. It's because they know that their relatives are being attacked in Ukraine.
Yeah, good point. Guys, thank you very, very much. Just ahead, what Ukrainian refugees are now saying as President Biden vows to welcome as many as 100,000 of them into the United States. We're live here in Poland, and you're in the Situation Room.
Perfection. And West Virginia Democratic Senator Joe Manchin says he plans to vote for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to serve on the Supreme Court. The announcement likely clears the path for President Joe Biden's historic nominee to be confirmed. If confirmed, Judge Jackson would become the first black woman to serve on the Supreme Court.
There's a whole fleet of them
The truth is out there. We'll dive into the newly released classified version of the infamous UFO report. What it reveals is next.
We're going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude.
First, one get 0.9% APR for 60 months with approved.
Now open in the heart of Los Angeles, the world's premier institution dedicated to the art and science of movies.
Kira, start us off.
South Dakota, they're down to the south, but for the most part, it's going to be dry. But things changing next week, and that's the next big thing I want to talk about. We started talking about this yesterday, and we'll give you the latest information now for the system coming in next week. So here's Monday night at 10. Not much happening then. Here's Tuesday morning, still pretty quiet. But then during the day on Tuesday into Tuesday night, we'll see the moisture making its way up here with some rain, even some snow in northeastern portions of South Dakota. Again, we're not going to get real specific right now. This is going to just giving you a general idea of what may be happening next week. And then Wednesday morning, at this point, looking like it might not be a great commute in southeastern parts of the area. And then even into Thursday, some wraparound precip into southeastern parts of our area, but the majority of that, though, to our east, and then it moves out by Thursday night. That's the European model. What about the American GFS model? Well, again, Tuesday, as the day goes on, you see the precipitation making its way up here. This is Tuesday by 10, and this one has it as mainly rain by Tuesday night, but it does eventually shift over to some snow into Wednesday morning. Wednesday evening, we have more wraparound snowfall on the backside of this system. This GFS model has this snow sticking around a little bit longer before exiting the area into Thursday night, I should say. So just keep that in the back of your mind. We'll continue to update this for you, but later on next week, starting Tuesday night into Wednesday and Thursday, some changes coming our way. But until then, things are looking pretty quiet. Right?
Please submitted to all the national job sites.
Whoa, which leaves you feeling?
Fit from Nano hearing aids. Don't waste thousands of dollars on expensive.
And, you know, I'll yield a minute or so that I have left of anything that you think many of my colleagues need to hear about the impact on our Native American and our indigenous communities.
Yes, one of I want to talk about the 2018 Camp Fire. And when we live in this area, all of that took place in our Mechoopda tribal territory. And Tetra Tech was a major corporation that was able to move in and get all the funding, the contracted funding, the tree removal, hazard tree, everything. We had local groups and local community members that we all got trained. And then I created a training program through the Mechoopda Indian tribe to train folks on how to manage not only forest health, but how to do wetlands, how to do meadows. And these are what would be considered fire breaks. So I have to use language that's used by the timber industry and also by the forest industry, but I have a unique language of my own as a traditional ecological knowledge practitioner. And I've been doing this for 20 years. And I usually teach children because children are actually way more open-minded than Congress. And so what I'm really telling you is that the management of these federal forests really need to be done in cooperation with every tribal nation in the United States. You have a lot of hands on deck and you have a lot of economic investments in each of those tribal territories that allow for workforce development. These workforce development can also hire and train non-native folks to work in the area. I think it's really important to strive to have workforce development when we're coming into this discussion instead of, you know, any other finger pointing. But I also think that we also have to understand the terms that I use are also because I need to cross-reference between the colonial world and the world that I live in today.
Yes.
Holy cow.
Heist of our history because Biden had won the election. She said the Biden crime family, quote, will be living in barges off Gitmo to face military tribunals for sedition. Now, you may hear that and say, gosh, another unhinged rant, a QAnon blog post. But we're talking about someone who shares a home with and a life with and a marriage with a justice of the Supreme Court. They actually do decide on whether or not something's sedition and whether or not imprisonment is warranted. It's also obviously on the facts, absurd and embarrassing, since it is the rioters at the Jan 6 rally who are facing sedition charges, not random people who participated in the election, not the Biden family, which suggests her grasp on the law is tenuous at best. She would go on in these leaked texts to encourage Mr. Meadows, quote, make a plan, release the Kraken, and save us from the left, a reference to a right-wing conspiracy theory that there is some sort of Kraken-style alliance that would help Trump stay in office. She also said, you must buck up your team on the inside, Mark. So this was her secret coordination with Donald Trump's top aide at a time when they were trying to overthrow the election. Now, the last text that they have, according to this leak, which I mentioned comes during the Jan 6 probe and first obtained by the Washington Post, was on January 10th. That's 4 days after the Stop the Steal rally, which she attended, and the insurrection, which she said she didn't. She denounced then the rioters who stormed the Capitol and said she was still, quote, disgusted with Mike Pence. Quote, we are living through what feels like the end of America, the end of liberty. That is her overwrought and somewhat disturbing summary of the peaceful outcome of an election. That's what she says is the end of liberty, not the January 6th rally that was called Stop the Steal that she attended. Now, the texts come at a crucial time when Trump and his allies thought they might get to the Supreme Court to help negate the election results or overturn them. The Times notes that Thomas effectively toggled between like-minded members of the executive and the legislative branches as her husband, who sits atop the judiciary branch that is supposed to serve as a check on the other branches of government, heard election-related cases, end quote. I'm reading that from the New York Times because it really puts it as clearly as possible. You're looking at a plot to also override the independence that the Supreme Court has in these kind of cases. Some Democrats are already saying Justice Thomas must recuse himself from any of these cases. Others, including Senator Blumenthal, say he actually has to come testify before the January 6th committee. He hasn't, of course, testified before the Congress since his confirmation hearings, which were volatile. Justice Thomas has not exactly rebutted concerns about his independence here. Indeed, he was the sole dissent in not one but two cases that made it all to the Supreme Court that touched on January 6th. In other words, every other Republican appointee and every Democratic appointee went one way, and he curiously went the other way. At the time, the public didn't know what they were hiding about his wife's role here. The Supreme Court declined to hear a case filed by the Pennsylvania Republican Party involving mail ballots, and Thomas wrote there was a compelling interest in rooting out the mere appearance of corruption in the political process, end quote. The other case involved Trump trying to hide January 6 documents from the investigation. Now, you may remember that one. It was a rebuke of Trump. If not for Thomas, it would have been 9-0. 8-1 is still incredibly strong. It tells you, and I will just simplify here and say as a lawyer, it tells you that there aren't a lot of real issues of law, that it's not a close call when 8 people on the court who sometimes disagree on matters of civil rights and democracy and voting all come together and say, no, you got to turn this stuff over. We're not having a secret kind of conspiracy continue where Congress can't investigate a violent attack on the floor of Congress. That's what all the Trump justices said. Think about that. All 3 people appointed by Trump said no. No, they're going to get to the bottom of this. The lone dissenter was Thomas, which is pretty curious because it was 1 month after his wife signed this letter saying that panel that he sided against was overtly partisan in its political persecution. Now, she has not spoken out since these texts leaked. She did say earlier this month, Clarence does not discuss his work with me, and I don't involve him in my work. Well, among other things, I have bad news for Ms. Thomas. If she thinks she has access to Mark Meadows and other people at the White House because of her independent expertise, well, there's literally no evidence to suggest that. Her work is his work because it's the reason she has access to all these power players. Now, there's much we don't know yet. At what point does Ginny Thomas completely undermine her husband's independence? Any honest judge is going to have to recuse from cases that directly involve their family, especially if their family is basically an hour away from other people's crimes. It's an open question. whether any of this will move Justice Thomas, but we also have insight into how he feels about his wife's actions. Here's one quip he previously made.
I keep a sign on my desk. Don't make fun of your wife's choices. You were one of them.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And that's so true.
It is so true. They did choose each other. They chose their worldviews. And we have to choose whether we want to believe that these people who are apparently so passionate about these issues, including being the only dissent in the case at the court, or being the only Supreme Court family member we know about who was at the Stop the Steal rally, we have to choose whether we believe that they never talk about any of this stuff. This is a big one. It's an important story. All of the leaks and texts are new, and we have some very special guests to get into it, including Barbara Boxer and former prosecutor Renato Mariotti when we're back in 1 minute.
Investments were clearly different.
New projects means new project.
Parents and friends.
Culture wars and gotcha theater than it is about constitutional theory.
And yeah, and it started, remember 30 years ago, Clarence Thomas here, and I watched every minute of it, and it was unbelievable. That was more about sexual harassment than some of the stuff we see now, but this goes back to the Bork hearing. It goes back, again, as a payback for some of the Richard Nixon stuff. But it's a bad development because all of our institutions now are under attack. The Congress, the presidency, the media, and now the judiciary. You know, Trump started going after judges early on in the campaign. That's just a really bad development. We have to have, if we're going to have a representative democracy like we have, you have to have faith in the institutions or it doesn't work.
You've been one of my favorite guests. You've been so awesome on this show. Really, your insight.
Just because I show up, right?
And we pay you so much, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, I live down the block from you. You're the best, Joe.
Hey, thank you, man. I appreciate it. Golf next week, huh?
Absolutely.
All right, take a look at this wild video from this week's tornado in Texas. That's a red pickup truck you see getting tossed around. The driver, incredibly, not only survived, but he's actually having a pretty good week, all things considered. We'll hear from him coming up. Plus, the bizarre story of a family that held a funeral for someone, and the person showed up alive a few days later. How does that happen? The dad of the son who was presumed dead joins us later.
Doing what they're supposed to do. Our downspouts flow.
Sunny, just a couple of puffy clouds here and there. 47, you have that northwest wind at 35 miles an hour as well. The wind falling off will be in the upper 20s by midnight. And
now, one of those winners is Alyssa Jules, who will be teaching math at the local middle school next year.
And the free lot makes it a lot more affordable to build a house in a city where there are very few housing options.
Super grateful for this opportunity, and I'm glad it happened because one, land is not cheap. Two, building a house isn't cheap. Buying a house isn't cheap. But to have something that it shows that the community wants to grow and wants people to come and live there.
Digital reporter Ray Yost has a closer look at the program and a KELOLAND.com original on our website.
Many KELOLAND retirees become snowbirds and spend their golden years down south where the weather's warmer. However, Larry Pressler is doing just the opposite. The former U.S. Senator is planning to move back to South Dakota later in the year. His more immediate plans include celebrating his 80th birthday next week. Find out how his battle with pancreatic cancer is factoring into his decision to return home in tonight's Eye on KELOLAND at 10.
For the fifth thing, let's get a final check of your forecast.
All right, skies clearing on out tonight, so it'll be clear and somewhat cool. Then tomorrow, it won't be as windy as today. We'll have a north breeze turning to the east, upper 30s, low 40s in eastern KELOLAND, the low 50s to the west.
Have a great evening.
This is a vehicle lineup do just that. Look no further than the 2022 Ram 1500 for a truck that can't be matched in luxury and is uncompromising in its capability. Designed to be durable, functional, and stylish, the Ram 1500 makes easy work of all your truck needs. Come in now during Ram Truck Month and check out the 2022 Ram 1500 at Iverson Auto in Mitchell and Huron.
I grew up working in my family's supper clubs. This is where it started with us as far as the fish that we serve at Culver's today. We source the finest cod and batter each fillet by hand and always cook it to order. That beautiful golden brown color and flaky on the inside. The fish fry is a Midwest tradition. It's about families coming together. I love bringing this tradition to guests everywhere. Mom and Dad would be proud. Welcome to Delicious.
Promotional consideration paid for by Schulte Subaru, Avera Orthopedics, Avera Health, Papa Murphy's, Carl's, and Touchstone Energy Cooperatives.
Tonight, a special edition of World News Tonight, and breaking news what Russia is now saying tonight, signaling potentially a major shift in the war in Ukraine, and President Biden here in Poland with U.S. troops. Tonight, a Russian military general now saying the, quote, main goal of the invasion is the liberation of eastern Ukraine, the Donbass region. This comes after Russian troops have been pushed back by the Ukrainians outside the capital of Kyiv. Despite a new attack on an oil depot near Kyiv, Russia now claiming it has no intention of seizing the city. Tonight, what the Pentagon now believes involving the capital. And the other development, after Russia seized the city of Kherson, reports tonight the Russians no longer have full control of that city. And tonight, here, harrowing video emerging online from inside the Mariupol theater, where hundreds were seeking shelter when it was targeted by a Russian airstrike. Tonight, Ukraine now saying at least 300 people were killed in that theater. James Longman in Lviv, Ukraine tonight, and Martha Raddatz with me here in Warsaw. What she's learned from her sources tonight, what the U.S. believes is driving this new message from Russia tonight. President Biden here in Poland this evening with U.S. troops, members of the 82nd Airborne, Cecilia Vega traveling with the president. The humanitarian emergency worsening here tonight. 10 million Ukrainians now displaced by war. More than 2 million of them right here in Poland. And tonight here, the orphans of Ukraine, without a parent even before the war began. Their journey, who's caring for them now, and their powerful message tonight for the world. Back in the U.S. tonight, growing scrutiny involving Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas after news his wife was texting the Trump White House after the election, pushing for efforts to overturn Joe Biden's victory. And new questions after Justice Thomas was the only justice who voted against releasing White House records related to the January 6th attack. John Carl standing by tonight. The deadly accident at an amusement park in Florida. A 14-year-old boy who fell from a ride. Authorities say he slipped out of his seat. And the major weather system moving in for the east tonight. Wind chills dropping into the teens and single digits. Rob Marciano standing by to time this out tonight.
From ABC News, this is a special edition of World News Tonight with David Muir, reporting tonight from Warsaw, Poland.
And good evening on this Friday night from Warsaw, Poland. President Biden is here tonight, part of his high-stakes mission in Europe to rally America's allies to confront Russia's war in Ukraine. And tonight, meeting with U.S. troops, the 82nd Airborne. But we begin tonight with the breaking headline, Russia tonight signaling what could be a major shift in the war, a narrowing of its objectives after suffering setbacks, particularly outside the capital of Kyiv. Tonight, Russia now saying their main goal all along has been only to take control of the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine. Tonight here, what the Pentagon believes is driving this. Now, all of this playing out after Russia claims to have bombed a major fuel depot with cruise missiles fired from the sea, claiming that depot outside the capital was supplying Ukrainian forces. And in another major development tonight, a senior U.S. defense official now says Russian forces that had taken control of the city of Kherson are no longer in full control of that city. Tonight, civilians repeatedly targeted in Kharkiv, an attack on people lining up for humanitarian aid and food, killing at least 6. And these searing new images tonight from the devastated city of Mariupol. After Russia's relentless attacks, tens of thousands still trapped in that city with little food, water, or power. And the images just now emerging online tonight from the moments after the missile strike of that theater in Mariupol. Officials now say at least 300 people who were seeking shelter there were killed. We do have it all covered tonight, beginning with this new message from Russia, what they now claim their military goal has been all along. Martha Raddatz with her sources. Can the Russians be believed on this? And ABC's James Longman leading us off from inside Ukraine tonight.
Tonight, Russia now signaling a major change in Ukraine after facing significant setbacks, now appearing to be reframing its mission. The Russian Defense Ministry seeming to significantly scale back its objectives, saying the main goal of the invasion now is to take control of the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine. The Pentagon tonight saying Ukrainians have put Russian forces on the defensive around the capital. And for the first time, the US says the Russians no longer have full control of Kherson, a city they had taken over. The Ukrainians now launching counterattacks nearby. A senior US defense official saying Russia may have lost up to 15% of its combat firepower and is now bringing reinforcements in from a Russian-occupied region of Georgia. US intelligence believes as many as 10,000 Russian troops may have been killed so far. But while Russia says it's refocusing its occupation on the Donbass region, this Mariupol official challenging what the Russians are now saying. He says he doesn't believe them. It's a lie. They want much more.
They want more than Donbass. They want more than Ukraine. It's absolutely a lie what they say.
His city now may be the site of the biggest single loss of life in this war so far. For the first time in videos circulating online, we're seeing the harrowing aftermath of Russia's strike on the theatre in Mariupol, where as many as 1,500 people were seeking shelter. Satellite images showing the word children written in Russian clearly seen in the front and back of the building, the message ignored. Just outside the capital, we're seeing the scope of destruction in Irpin. This verified drone video published by local media showing street after street in flames after relentless shelling. And graphic video circulating online of the Russian airstrike in Kharkiv, where people were lined up for humanitarian aid and food. It killed at least 6. In southern Ukraine, residents on the front line of the Russian occupation say there have been more rocket attacks in recent days. While some have vowed to stay, others, like 70-year-old Victor, have had no choice but to flee Russia's onslaught. We barely escaped, he says.
And James Longman joins us from Lviv again tonight. And James, if the Russians are to be believed, and obviously that's a big if, when they say they're going to focus on the eastern part of Ukraine, there are still major questions, of course, about how much of the region they plan to take, because the Ukrainians have signaled already that they will fight for all of it.
Well, that's right, David. 2/3 of that region is contested. So does Russia now pour all its energy into taking the entire area? And Mariupol, all signs point to Russia permanently occupying that city. Ukraine has been well armed and resourced by the West, and they have no intention of backing down now. David.
All right, James Longman leading us off on a Friday night. James, thank you. Tonight, the Biden administration, the Pentagon, of course, following this new messaging from Russia very closely. I want to bring in our chief global affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz, with me here in Warsaw. And Martha, I know you've been talking with your sources tonight. I'm so curious what they think here. Did the Russians underestimate the Ukrainians? Did they underestimate how hard it would be to push in on the capital?
That's exactly what they do. And that's exactly what they're doing now. They're moving those troops. They're moving them to defensive positions. They've basically given up on maneuverability. Those tanks, they're stalled all over Ukraine. So they're going to have these defensive camps surrounding their artillery, but they will continue to shell those major cities, according to a U.S. official.
Hunker down in the east, but keep firing.
Exactly.
In the meantime, I want to show the viewers at home this map, that what this eastern region is, the Donbass. It's what we were talking about at the very beginning of this war 1 month ago. When they say this has been their goal all along, do your sources believe that?
They believe that they want the Donbass. They have been there since 2014. But what they're doing now is reinforcing those positions so they can use it in negotiations, saying, this is it. We own it. It won't get them very far, though, David.
All right, Martha Raddatz with us here in Warsaw tonight. Martha, always great to have you here. Tonight, President Biden, of course, also here in Poland, spending time with U.S. troops, members of the 82nd Airborne Division at a military base here in Poland. Tonight, here his message for the troops and for Putin. Here's our chief White House correspondent, Cecilia Vega, traveling with the president.
Tonight, as NATO allies prepare to move more troops and weapons into Eastern Europe, President Biden in Poland with members of the 82nd Airborne. More than 10,000 U.S. troops in Poland right now, the president thanking them for their service.
What's at stake, not just in what we're doing here in Ukraine to try to help the Ukrainian people and keep the massacre from continuing, but beyond that, what's at stake is what are your kids and grandkids going to look like in terms of their freedom.
President Biden standing firm in his promise not to send troops into this war, and standing alongside Poland's leader, he said the true show of strength is the unity of the NATO alliance against Vladimir Putin.
The single most important thing that we can do from the outset is keep the democracies united in our opposition and our effort to curtail the devastation that is occurring at the hands of a man who I quite frankly think is a war criminal.
And Cecilia Vega with us here in Warsaw tonight. And Cecilia, tomorrow President Biden meets with refugees here.
Yeah, David, you'll remember he told me when we were in Brussels yesterday that he really wanted to meet with refugees while he is on this trip. And so that's what he is doing tomorrow. You know this, David, being here, so many refugees from Ukraine here in Poland, the majority, in fact, who have fled that country. So the president is now going to come face to face with the inhumanity of this crisis. David, we are also learning that tomorrow the president is going to give what aides are calling a major speak. He's going to be speaking to the high stakes the world is facing with this crisis.
Cecilia Vega traveling with the president. Cecilia, thank you. And as you heard Cecilia report there, tomorrow President Biden will witness the humanitarian emergency playing out right here in Poland. More than 2 million Ukrainians right here in Poland alone. Tonight here, the orphans of Ukraine, without a parent even before the war began. We document their extraordinary journey. They are witnesses to war and what they want the world to know. It's been 1 month and 1 day since this war began in Ukraine, leading to the other emergency here, the humanitarian crisis. Tonight, more than 10 million Ukrainians are now displaced from their homes. Our trips here to report on the families fleeing their country. The boy crying after the long journey to get out of Ukraine, telling his mother he is tired.
This is yours?
So many children carrying their favorite stuffed animals, Alexei and his favorite dog.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Yes, you do. You have your dog.
22 hours on 2 trains, sleeping on the floor.
Our children sleep in the floor, in the floor
Of the train?
Yes.
And the family from Kharkiv, the daughter on the missiles landing in their neighborhood.
The rocket just.
It's terrifying. And you tried to stay as long as you could?
My father is still in Ukraine because he can't leave his country.
A kiss from her mother. So many of the men, the fathers, the brothers, staying behind to fight the Russians. We saw the room set aside for mothers and children. And tonight, that number, UNICEF now says 4.3 million children have now been displaced because of war. More than half of all the children in Ukraine. And we wondered about the children traveling alone, the orphans of Ukraine, already without parents before the war began. Who is now taking care of them? Tonight, we document their journey. Fleeing the capital of Kyiv, the stops at shelters along the way, in sleeping bags on the floor. City workers from Kyiv are now their caregivers. These are the children who all faced loss even before the war. The boy in blue, the little girl and her smile, showing their strength, their resilience. 40 children from 5 orphanages in Kyiv. Ola in pink, she is 6, and now, like the rest of the children, living in Poland. She tells us of the packed train. She also tells us she wants to go home, that Putin should leave. There are also the teenagers here without parents. They already survived their own heartbreak. Now they care for the younger children. 17-year-old Maxim with 2 of the children on his lap. When Putin's war began, he was terrified.
Around a long time, I afraid, very afraid. I was worried.
17-year-old Alexander tells us just being here in Poland has brought him some peace.
It's not in danger in Poland. But I dream in the moment about stopped war, and we come back, back in Ukraine.
We are allowed into the facility in Ustron, now taking care of the children. 2 little girls, Nastya and Augusta, both 8, their beds next to each other. Nastya telling us about the bombs that used to fall where she lived. Augusta telling us about the harrowing journey, being told to close the windows and turn off their lights on the train because they saw explosions so close to them. I was scared, she told us. I didn't know if I would survive. These boys, Danya and Kola, are both 9, telling us about the tanks they saw and the security checkpoints they had to pass through, the kind of images children will carry their entire lives. Kola says he would like Putin gone and for Russia and Ukraine to be friends. Here in Poland alone, more than 2 million Ukrainian refugees now. The children here have been tested, and so have the workers. Catherine Komar, just one of the many who are now caring for the children, hoping to do right by them.
The children talk about the sirens.
Yes.
And that there are no more sirens here in Poland.
It's calm.
No. Okay. Each knot is one of your foot.
When he's on the border of a war zone, it's not for Americans to criticize their president. I love seeing him with the 82nd Airborne today. I love seeing him with the Polish refugees. I applaud the effort to rally the free world. And again, Harold and Kimberly are right. NATO's killing it. They're coming together. They're acting correctly. They're trying to get their act together. And it's all about Putin the villain. And the early reporting out of the Telegraph and the Financial Times tonight is that Russia's announcing a change in their war plans. They're addressing themselves, well, they're just really wanting to lock down the Donbass. Well, let's hope that's the case and not disinformation. Maybe they're getting realistic about the fact that this was not an invasion that Putin ought to have launched.
One possible reason for that, from the Hill, let's put it on the screen, Russian troop fatalities in Ukraine nearing losses over 10 years in Afghanistan. NATO estimated Wednesday that Russian forces have lost 7,000 to 15,000 soldiers in the war with Ukraine, an estimate on par with the 15,000 troops Russia lost over the course of a decade in Afghanistan. Kimberly, your thoughts on the impact it's having on Putin's military and on his psyche?
Yeah, it's actually worse than that. If you go on to read the report, they're estimating that those are the numbers dead. But if you take into account those that are missing in action or who have walked off the job, they think the number could be as many as 40,000, which if you consider there was 190,000 Russian troops that came in here, that is a stunning, absolutely stunning number. Then add in estimates at 10 to 15% of their military equipment has been disabled. And that attack that we saw on a Russian warship, and you begin to see why they might be coming up with excuses to reorient their strategy as they see, or they are saying, toward the east. That is the area that Hugh was just referencing, which is where they had essentially been running things anyway. Let's hope maybe this is a beginning of somewhat of a retreat.
Harold, your thoughts on the impact of massive losses could have on Putin's next steps?
I think the two most, I agree with everything that Kimberly and Hugh have said. I think the two most important things that Vladimir Putin underestimated, one was the readiness and preparedness of his own military, and first and foremost, the resistance and resolve that the Ukrainians have shown.
Up next, a Friday lightning round, progressives versus Biden, inflation, new Fox polls, plus winners and losers.
But it is an interesting objective measurement here that compared to recent nominees, you see Kavanaugh and Gorsuch down in the 40s, Roberts, a Republican, but did very well, Ginsburg above 50%, but Jackson right now, across America, a lot of coverage, people have learned a bit about her. She is, in our polarized time, more supported than other recent Trump nominees and on par with Roberts, who styled himself as an umpire famously in those hearings. What does that tell you? Is there a note of optimism here amidst all that other nonsense?
Absolutely. She's the second most popular Supreme Court nominee in recent memory. That means Americans want her. It's the same energy when Biden announced that he would be nominating a black woman on the debate stage in South Carolina in February 2020. It galvanizes people. People want to witness this history. People want this change, and they want the highest court in the land to be more reflective of the country it is presiding over. And so I think this energy is what Democrats are going to be latching onto as they proceed with this confirmation process, even potentially holding out for some Republicans to support this confirmation.
Yeah. All really interesting. Long week, long day, long show, so we're running short on time. But Juanita Tolliver, always good to see you.
Thanks, Ari.
Absolutely. We're going to fit a break, but when we come back before the hour's up, why Vladimir Putin has been echoing Tucker Carlson about cancel culture.
It's not on T-Mobile makes as much sense as playing
on the program with you and Crystal. It's been fantastic. You do an incredible job, and I look forward to whatever the next opportunity is to join you on the air and help educate the American people. God bless you, man. Have a good one.
Hi, Joe. What can I say? You are one of a kind, and I'm going to miss the heck out of you. You're smart, you're thoughtful, you're funny, you're compassionate, you're a great storyteller and an amazing journalist, and you make all of us better. So good luck on your next adventure. All the best, always.
Hey, Joe. It's your favorite C-list guest, but a guy that will always show up. I'm sad to see you're leaving. I think we started together on Channel 9 election night at News Nation. Nobody does what you do better, and people ask about people like you that are anchors, and I go, I don't think people understand or appreciate how difficult that is and just how well you do it. So I'm sad to see you go, but you know what, buddy? We'll always have Jesse Smollett. See you, Joe. We'll see you around.
Joe Donlin, I cannot believe today is your last day. I am so sad to see you go, but I am thrilled for your next chapter. You and your entire team have operated with kindness and care, and you will be greatly missed. But I am rooting you on from out here in Texas.
Hey Joe, Jorge Ventura here with the Daily Caller, and gonna miss coming on your show and talking about really important issues and bringing those frontline stories to your audience. Thank you so much, and best of luck in the future.
Hey Joe, it's Brian Enton in Miami. We're really gonna miss you down here. It's been such a pleasure being on your show and getting to know you. I know we'll stay in touch, and I look forward to seeing what happens next with you. Love you, Joe.
We'll miss you.
Joe, I can't believe you're leaving News Nation. You redefined television in the Pacific Northwest. You're a plank holder. You're a cornerstone of this network. But I know whatever you do next is just going to be amazing. If you were perfect, you'd be a Marine. Nevertheless, Semper Fi. Hoorah!
Hey there, Joe Donlin. I am going to miss you. You are one of the good guys, especially in this business where we're all working fast and we sometimes just forget to say please and thank you, but you never do. Here's the deal. I want you to keep me on speed dial because I'm keeping you on speed dial, so you're not going to shake me. Good luck, my friend, and don't be a stranger.
Hey, Joe, I so enjoyed our time together bantering back and forth on the Donlin Report. Wanted to wish you continued success in whatever it is you do. Be well. Take care, my friend.
Joe, thank you so much for a great 6 months at the Donlin Report. You're one of the best anchors I've ever worked with. Good luck.
Joe, thank you for 5 months here. You will always be America's dad, and I just want to thank you for being just so inclusive and listening to all of our ideas. Good luck.
Thank you for always being so kind to me. Bye, Joe.
Bye, Joe.
Joe, it's Ben Glebe. I am so sad to hear that the Donlin Report is ending. I mean, not that sad. I'm on vacation in Paris right now. Literally, the Eiffel Tower is just right out the window right there, so I'll be fine. But we will miss you. Thanks for having me on the show. It was always fun laughing with you. Are you guys going to use this? Because it's weird that I'm in bed. You decide.
Joe, we're going to miss you so much here in D.C. It was so great to be a part of your show. You did incredible work, and it was so great to break down all of the news from Washington with you each night. I know great things are to come, but you'll be missed, and we'll keep in touch.
Joe Donlin, one of the great guys, if not the great guy in TV news. So sorry to see you go. My favorite thing that you did on this show happened in our first week, where you wrote our open as a Dr. Seuss book. Here's a little bit of that.
After all these years of reading, how could it be his books have troubling undercurrents many didn't see? His reps are speaking out, trying to explain their action. The move to cancel 6 books has been slowly gaining traction.
So in the immortal words of Dr. Seuss, I'm not sad because it's over. I'm happy that it happened. Take care, Joe.
Oh, man, you guys are trying to make me cry.
Well, I have a few seconds to add my own thoughts here, which is that I have a unique perspective because I get to watch you both on and off TV. And I can inform the viewers that the same Joe Donlin that they all enjoy every night and getting to spend an hour with is the exact same human being that we get to see every night and every day in the newsroom, and that is a rarity in television. And it has been an absolute pleasure, and your graciousness and kindness welcoming me here was really second to none. So thank you, and we're really going to miss you.
It's been a wild trip, and I will never forget it, that's for sure. So many of the people who make this show go are, you don't see. And you mean all of the people you just saw, obviously you do on the air, but the people behind the scenes as well, and the crew, I love you all, and I thank you for all that you've done. And I actually have a few more words. I didn't realize any of that was coming. But my side of the other, on the other side of this break. Thanks, Leland.
Thank you.
Good luck, man.
You too.
At JP Morgan, the only definition.
It can be
And it's easy to customize your insurance at Liberty Mutual.
The president and my party are unable to address those issues, inflation, gas and food being a big part of it. If they're unable to address crime and the border, I think foremost the president's got to win in Ukraine. We won't win in November, and frankly, we shouldn't. I think the Congresswoman should look at those issues as she thinks about young voters and, for that matter, every voter.
Hugh, is this making Republican strategists happy heading into the midterms?
Oh, I think we should fund a 24/7, 365 cable channel for AOC. I just want her on TV all the time talking about everything because she gets Bronx, she gets Queens, she understands New York, but she doesn't understand the country, and I just love having her talk.
Okay, President Biden warning about food shortages in light of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Let's play it.
And it's going to be real. The price of these sanctions is not just imposed upon Russia. It's imposed upon an awful lot of countries as well, including European countries and our country as well. And because both Russia and Ukraine have been the breadbasket of Europe in terms of wheat, for example. Just to give you one example.
Hugh, what about that concern as we look ahead as this crisis drags on?
Well, Jen Psaki came out and immediately said and corrected the record that the United States will not be suffering food shortages. We are blessed with an abundant agricultural supply. And so, again, the president's got to get back from me on the United States soil before I open up on his trip. But the White House corrected the president on that one as well.
Okay, now it's time for winners and losers, a highlight of every week on Special Report.
These are light and easy to use, too.
Stop missing out on it.
And what you love to eat, and we create a science-backed plan that's designed just for you. At WW,
the portable charging dock for only $397 with free shipping, or opt in to make 4 easy payments. Supplies are limited.
A Ford built for you by you.
800-360-7114.
Hi, it's
weekdays on PBS Kids. Check out the show about a secret.
The husband and kids being mine. Nobody wants that for their kids.
The people you love are worth quitting for. You can quit. For free help, call 1-800-QUIT-NOW.
Security check.
I called to check my zip code.
Check your...
032893. That's 800.
How it happened. Number 7, spring training, Phillies and Yankees. Phillip Evans.
Arizona. Arizona didn't play like they normally.
Check may now be available to you in your zip code. Make sure you're not missing out.
And when they come back with their family after the wish, it's often like seeing a total.
It's a decrease in some types of antibodies. The most common side effect.
Act like any of the killers I've talked to.
Why did you check every single month? Call now.
I called to get everything I deserve.
I called to check my zip code for a plan.
The sanctions would deter him.
The deterrence effect of these sanctions is still a meaningful one.
Would that helpline? Call. Check your zip code.
Park, just like we can to people in the government help.
8200. That's 1-800.
Football League Northern Arizona Wranglers taking on Vegas Nighthawks. Caleb Barker not doing what's supposed to happen. Drop backs to throw, ball.
Tonight's American Snapshot is a personal thank you. It's a picture of friendship, collaboration, and camaraderie. This is the group behind the Donlin Report, the gears that make this show go. And as you know, this is my last show here at News Nation. I've decided to leave the network, and there is no way I could have done this without this group. Now, you may picture 20 or 30 people behind the scenes. This is pretty much it. A half dozen or so of us put this hour together every day. Now, the other networks have those 20 to 30 people on each show, maybe even more, which makes what we do more impressive. But it's a startup, and we'll get there. My goal from the beginning was for all of us to feel smarter at the end of the hour, and I think we did that. There's so much anger and outrage. Social media has become so toxic. I would urge you to support content that makes you smarter, not madder. To me, the guests were always the stars. They provided the insight, the information, the interaction, and the fun. I just asked the questions, and it was sure great to hear from all of them just a few minutes ago. I appreciate all that they did. It's been an honor to host this show. I have learned a ton, and I have no doubt it has made me a much better anchor. Not many people get this opportunity, their own national show, and I will always be grateful for this experience. I thank you for watching. I wish my friends here at News Nation all the best, and we'll see you down the road.
As Ukrainian forces retake more ground, Russia no longer fully in control of Kherson, the first city to fall. President Biden today meeting with U.S. troops about 50 miles from the Ukraine border, his message to them about their mission. The president also set to meet with refugees. 2 million Ukrainians escaping here to Poland. The family I met at the border on their dangerous journey, their evacuation route attacked, and the loved ones they left behind. Also, the new fallout from bombshell text messages from the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, urging former President Trump's chief of staff to fight to overturn the 2020 election. Our new reporting tonight on what Democrats are now calling on the justice to do as he's released from the hospital after nearly a week. And the tragedy at a Florida amusement park, a 14-year-old boy falling to his death from the world's tallest drop ride. The search for answers.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt, reporting tonight from the Poland-Ukraine border.
Good evening from Poland, everyone. Ukraine just a few minutes walk from here. Behind me, the aid workers who have helped turn this into a critical way station on the road to safety for some 40,000 refugees who have passed through this crossing alone, over 2 million in total here in Poland. President Biden in Poland himself tonight after recognizing the outsized burden the country has carried in absorbing those escaping the war. He also visited members of the U.S. 82nd Airborne who were rushed here to bolster NATO at the start of the crisis. He'll make what the White House calls a major speech on the crisis tomorrow. The United Nations this evening estimating more than 1,000 civilians have been killed by fighting in Ukraine, more than 1,700 injured. On the war front, a senior U.S. military official says the city of Kherson may no longer be fully in Russian hands as Ukrainian troops fight to reclaim it. And Vladimir Putin now accusing the West of trying to cancel his country. I'll share some of the stories I heard from families here on the border today, but let's start with Chief White House correspondent Kristen Welker.
Tonight, President Biden in Poland, ground zero of the refugee crisis. The country taking in more than 2 million refugees from Ukraine so far. The president meeting with Poland's president about the growing disaster.
I'm here in Poland to see firsthand the humanitarian crisis.
Earlier, talking to U.S. troops stationed here and casting this moment in historic terms.
Are democracy going to prevail and the values we share? Or autocracy is going to prevail. And that's really what's at stake.
The National Security Advisor revealed today the White House is working on contingency plans if Russian President Vladimir Putin attacks NATO allies. The president comparing the unfolding conflict to China's deadly crackdown on pro-democracy protesters in 1989.
I mean, talk about what happened in Tiananmen Square. That's Tiananmen Square squared.
And this morning, the president unveiling another step to try to squeeze the Russian economy. The U.S. will start shipping more liquefied natural gas to Europe.
We're coming together to reduce Europe's dependence on Russian energy. Putin has issued Russia's energy resources to coerce and manipulate its neighbors. He's used the profits to drive his war machine.
But even after today's announcement, Europe, like China, India, and others, will still continue buying Russian oil and gas, providing Putin with a critical economic lifeline. It comes after the president wrapped up an emergency NATO summit in Brussels, where the U.S. and its allies announced new sanctions against Russian lawmakers and $1 billion in humanitarian aid to Ukraine. But it's all fallen far short of what Ukraine's President Zelenskyy is pleading for, including tanks, fighter jets, and anti-ship weapons. Tonight, some Republicans saying President Biden is still not doing enough.
He has this tendency to let the bad guy behave poorly first and then come in. We should have gotten more lethal weapon systems into Ukraine when it was easy, rather than, again, waiting for the invasion to happen.
Tomorrow, President Biden will meet with refugees here in Warsaw and then deliver what the White House is calling a significant address about what's at stake. Lester.
Kristen Welker, thank you. In Ukraine, Russian forces are surrounding a city in the north as new images emerge from that brutal missile strike on civilians sheltering in a Mariupol theater. Ukrainian officials now saying hundreds were killed. Richard Engel is in Ukraine.
Russia is tightening its noose around yet another Ukrainian city. This time it's Chernihiv, which tonight is nearly surrounded and is fighting for its survival. In this video, the mayor showed the furious Russian attacks and called for assistance. Further south, the city of Mariupol is already completely surrounded, and its ruins stand in tragic testimony to the cost of Russia's siege warfare. Today, we saw the first images from inside a theater Russia attacked 9 days ago. Ukrainians covered in dust who'd been sheltering inside looked stunned. As a narrator says, a missile hit the center of the theater. Officials in Mariupol said today around 300 people taking shelter in the building were killed. NBC News cannot verify the claim. It would be the single worst atrocity since the war began. But Russian President Vladimir Putin says Russia is the real victim, today accusing the West of engaging in cancel culture to erase Russia's identity, comparing it, as Putin often does now, to Nazi repression. As the Russian military announced it's consolidating its forces in the east. But even there, a U.S. military official says Russia is losing ground in the city of Kherson, where Ukrainians have been standing up to Russian occupying forces, blocking the roads, refusing to back down, even in the face of gunfire.
Richard, Russia is now making gains in southeastern Ukraine and now saying that's where they're going to focus this war. What does that say about what's truly going on?
Well, I think what we're seeing is that Russia is trying to make success out of failure. Russia is saying that its main objective is to consolidate its control in the east, which happens to be the only place where Russia has managed to exert some control, and it is struggling to hold on to the east. So it's a major climb down. Nothing like what Russia said it would initially do, which was to take over all of this country, including Kyiv, in just a matter of days.
Richard Engel tonight, thank you. We're learning more about the desperate situation in Mariupol from those who have made it out of the city. Tonight, Gabe Gutierrez has a rare and exclusive look inside a city under siege.
In Mariupol, no one is safe. Run fast, this mother says. Don't cry, run fast. The child does. Sobbing. This is a rare up-close look at the besieged port city from a family who endured weeks huddled in a dark, cold basement to escape the shelling. The pictures seem more at home in a history book than a smartphone. But this is 2022, and yet in southeastern Ukraine, they're scrounging for food and watching their lives burn. There is no way to describe this, Lyubov Marchenko says. She took those videos. This is her 7-year-old son, Artem. Those were his cries. He ran fast. God saved us and we survived, she says. What would you tell Putin? Please stop this madness, she responds. Lyubov says the building above where they were staying was hit twice. So were others. They felt the blast wave. In a last-ditch effort, they boarded a humanitarian bus to escape. We were on the bus and they started shelling in front of us, she says. We had to use another road. But they made it out to this bus in Lviv, bound for the Czech Republic. We're grateful from the bottom of our hearts, she says. Artem is no longer running. And we've just heard from them. They've now made it to the Czech Republic. But tonight, so many of their friends and family are still unreachable in Mariupol. Lester.
All right, Cmgus Vcr, thank you. For so many refugees, the first stop is here in Poland, which has seen an influx of more than 2 million Ukrainians. Today, I met with some of those escaping the war.
Here, one road ends, another begins. Many asking themselves how they made it this far. Dina, a mother of 4 for Bryansk, tells me we were traveling by evacuation bus, and before us there were cars attacked. Now separated by the war from her husband, her 16-year-old daughter Alina takes on greater responsibility.
You're the big sister. What do you tell your young siblings to keep their spirits high?
Well, usually they cry when the explosions go off. Alina tells me they were crying a lot, and I was saying, keep calm, and we're praying.
What would you be doing right now if it weren't for the war?
I would be studying, I think. I would be seeing my friends.
12-year-old Anya likely feels the same, her mother asking her to speak for the family.
Making the decision to leave, what it was like as a family to make that important decision?
Bombing was the reason, she explained, the sound, and they were going on, and so we had to go to the shelter. But not everyone could evacuate.
Who did you leave behind in Ukraine? In the 3 weeks since I last visited a Polish border crossing, the flood has become more of a trickle of people as aid organizations simply become more efficient at finding people, moving them on, and matching them to homes.
A month into the war, many still end up in shelters near the border. A transportation network has developed, getting many others to homes and destinations arranged by aid groups and volunteers. This bus crossed the border today with 60 people with disabilities.
We have a few people that are in the Ukraine, and they gather families living with disabilities, and they're able to get them out of the city.
Among them, Irina's brother, unable to care for himself. Staying in Kyiv, not an option.
Do you hope to bring your brother home someday?
I don't know, because in Ukraine he is not take help.
A month in, there seem to be fewer tears, more resolve, more hope, even among the young.
What do you want people in the world to know about what is happening to your family and many other families?
Her answer, I would like them to know that it is indeed terrifying, that you need to save family and to be together.
For many refugees who made it here, the journey is not over. They are in limbo. And though President Biden announced 100,000 would be able to come to America, many are unsure of how to even begin the process. Kelly Kobiea has a story.
This gaming company close to the Polish border turned its offices into temporary homes for Ukrainian refugees. It's where we first met 72-year-old Alla Devulak, 48 hours after fleeing the war, in shock and alone.
You have family in Chicago?
Desperate to wait out the war with her grandkids in Chicago. 3 weeks later, she's still here, her tourist visa denied. The reason? She couldn't prove she would return to her home country. I don't know what to do, she tells me. I don't know Polish. I can't even ride the bus because I don't understand how. 1 month into the war, millions are in limbo, struggling with the language and finding apartments in overcrowded cities, stuck in temporary shelters, like Elena Rasakova, her family and 2 dogs living in this sports hall for 8 days. She told me she's now applying for emergency visas to Canada and hopes to stay with friends in the Netherlands for a few weeks while they wait for an answer. Many, like Svetlana Serena and her daughter, don't know where to go.
Do you want to stay in Poland?
I don't know. I think about relatives in USA, maybe in Germany, but I don't know for sure. We don't know what to do next. We want home.
That's what Ala wants, but she knows she can't stay in this shelter and she can't go back. It's impossible now, she says. Where I come from, the worst is just beginning.
And Kelly joins me now. For people like Ala, what is the next step, especially if they want to end up in America?
Well, that's really unclear tonight, Lester. Ala's family wants her to reapply for a visa. They want her and are hopeful that she can join them in the United States. But they're not even sure where to start. And as you said, the Biden administration is saying that 100,000 refugees from Ukraine will be allowed into the United States. But at this point, it's not even clear what the requirements will be.
More hurdles beyond the border. All right, Kelly, thanks so much. In 60 seconds, the new fallout over the text sent by the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas urging former President Trump's chief of staff to overturn the election. The growing pressure on Justice Thomas next.
You would come out and have the top guy say it, not his deputy when the top guy is who knows where. All right, thank you both so very much. And out front next, horrifying new images from inside that Mariupol theater. Moments after it was torn apart by a Russian airstrike. We're finally getting images, and we are finally knowing the dead. Plus, a group dubbed Putin's private army now said to be inside Ukraine. And according to one Ukrainian official, its mission is to assassinate Zelensky. And the head of the International Red Cross coming under criticism tonight after being photographed with Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, smiling and shaking hands.
Painter, when we had a chance to speak with him yesterday, mentioned that same thing. He kind of said they know
to fight them. Tell your doctor.
60s and 70s around here. Meanwhile, in the southeast, we're just a touch warmer than at this time yesterday, including.
And in fact, the past month we've seen they're right. That is where the primary threat to NATO is originating. In fact, I think it's likely the increased numbers of U.S. troops we've seen in Poland are there for the foreseeable future.
Ambassador Stephen Mull, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Farmers have a proverbial bumper crop. They've never going to have seen prices like this in recent years, but that we're going to continue to see extended inflation at the grocery store the way we have through the COVID period.
And you brought up the COVID period, which is sort of when this big government spend began. Families First COVID Act, CARES Act included $1,200 in stimulus checks, enhanced unemployment benefits. Paycheck Protection Act, $483 billion more in PPP funding. Consolidated Appropriations Act, $600 stimulus checks, $920 billion in spending. Additional federal unemployment benefits, American Rescue Plan, another $1,400 in stimulus checks and money for schools to be pumped into the economy. Are we going to look back on this and say it was just too much, and it's almost like giving a kid a little too much candy at Disney World? When they come off it, it's going to be really painful?
Some people are saying that. I mean, I've been saying from the beginning that if you are of that view, that inflation came not from the supply chain disruptions, not from COVID, which I'm more in the COVID camp. But if you think it came from too much monetary and fiscal stimulus, you should be hyped up about 2022 when all of that stuff rolls off and in your phrase, the sugar high ends. I mean, it should be an abrupt end to the overheating of the economy as we move into a period of fiscal drag, because we're not going to get increases the way we saw in 2021. The reason I don't think that there's going to be an immediate drop to the inflation rate is I don't think that it mostly came from government stimulus. I think mostly it came from, we got the supply chains deeply messed up and people could not spend money on services, which is what they usually spend money on. They all went out to buy physical goods, and we just can't handle that.
Yeah. Hey, Professor, I always appreciate the intellectual honesty and the thoughtfulness you bring to this conversation. It's refreshing. We appreciate it. Have a great weekend, sir.
Yeah, you too. We always have a good time.
We do. You're welcome back anytime. Thank you. Live pictures of Miami Beach, night 2 of the curfew.
See when you're there, and sometime you've been there, you're going to see women, young people standing in the middle in front of a damn tank, just saying, "I'm not leaving. I'm holding my ground."
You're going to see when you're there? He's talking about Ukraine and telling American troops next door in Poland, "You're going to see when you're there?" So is that just another Biden gaffe? Or did Joe just let that slip that we're sending Americans to Ukraine? I mean, think about it. He spent a whole day behind closed doors with NATO leadership. Do you think talk of putting American boots on the ground in Ukraine came up at some point? And Joe accidentally just tipped his hand here? Or was he just speaking? His comments just shot around the world like wildfire, and the White House had to play cleanup, telling Fox News this: "The president has been clear we are not sending U.S. troops to Ukraine, and there is no change in that position." Okay, so there's...
Тише, не плачь. Ужасное, не плачь. Бегом, беги. Бегом.
With me now is NBC News correspondent Cal Perry in Lviv. Cal, I'm going to let you talk because it's hard for me as a mom to hear a little child crying and screaming like that. It's very, very difficult to listen to that and to hear those kinds of images. But please tell us what's going on, because the sense of the reporting, and I've been watching your great reporting all day, is that it is the Ukrainian military that's on the move. They are the ones who at this point have leverage, or not leverage, but they have momentum. Is that an accurate assessment? Because it also just seems like it's just carnage everywhere.
Yeah, so I think that is an absolute accurate assessment. In the last sort of 48 to 72 hours, this counteroffensive is actually picking up steam. It's picking up momentum in 2 places. In the capital of Kyiv, we understand that Ukrainian forces have pushed the Russian army back some 15 miles in some places, and perhaps even broken through those lines. And what I mean by breaking through them is actually going through those lines and then flanking those Russian soldiers. We understand the losses, at least according to the Ukrainian government, are quite heavy. We heard from the president tonight saying that 16,000 Russian soldiers have died. Now, again, to be clear, that is the Ukrainian government assessment, not an independent assessment. In fact, NATO puts the deaths of Russian soldiers somewhere between 7,000 and 14,000. No matter how you slice it, though, those are heavy losses, and those don't even account for wounded Russian soldiers. So that's sort of one side of this war, Joy. The other side is what you're talking about, which is the absolute devastation of civilian areas and the direct targeting of civilian areas by the Russian army. We talked a lot about Mariupol. The deadliest attack now, single attack that we've seen in this war, is on that theater. At least 300 people killed. But again, these are early numbers. The numbers are going to be far worse than that. And when you look at sort of the big picture in the eastern part of the country, you now see this brutal punishment of civilians on behalf of the Russian army. So it's almost as though the Ukrainian army is fighting the Russian army. The Russian army is fighting not only the Ukrainian army, but also taking out its sort of frustration on these civilian areas. Again, when hearing the Ukrainian president tonight, it's clear he sees the tide turning militarily here on the ground. And we should say the Ukrainian army, for its part, has grown in size since this war began. So many international foreign fighters have come in. It's clear that there is a united front against the Russians. Now the question is, of course, how does Russia either get this off-ramp, or does Putin lash out, use chemical weapons? That's something people here obviously fear very much, Joy.
Ooh, Cal Perry, thank you as always. Stay safe. Really appreciate you. With me now is Maxim Borodin, a Mariupol City Council member. And Councilmember Borodin, you know, the pictures that we are looking at, they look like Armageddon, to be honest with you, and particularly the pictures out of Mariupol. Please give us the latest on your city and on how many people have been rescued from and still might be trapped in that poor theater.
Yes, this is terrible video is really from Mariupol. I know the streets, this building. I know my friends lived some time ago there. So it's terrible to see all these pictures, all this video, and it's continuous and continuous. People who get out from the city for the last days, they telling the terrible stories, and it's like scars in their hearts and minds for all lifetime. From the last data, I know that about minimum 100,000 people stay in Mariupol. A lot of people get out, but it's not enough because a lot of children, a lot of pregnant women stay in Mariupol. Russians make some points of humanitarian help, so they called. But they use it for the propaganda TV. They show how they liberate Mariupol. But this liberation, it's all about ruins. It's all about stop the peaceful life of prosperous city. So it's unbelievable. All who can get out, they really happy they can get out. But now they understand that they're homeless. And it's another pain for all of us to, we cannot, before we stop this war, we cannot return to our city and build it from the scratch.
We've also heard these reports of Russians, essentially, well, not even essentially, kidnapping Ukrainians and taking them inside Russia. Are you hearing those things? And what are you hearing, you know, anything are you hearing of these people once they've been taken inside Russia?
There are different situations. Some people's willing to go out of the city anyway, because they really don't want to go to Russia. But when they have choice, only choice to get out from the bombing, you understand, they are not pro-Russians, but they get out of the city because of their lives and the lives of their children. So Russians use this and show the picture that a lot of people go out from the Mariupol, not to Ukrainian side, but for the Russian side. But it's not true. It's not their true willing. And I say we have a lot more casualties if in the near time Ukraine don't get a lot of help, not only defensive systems, but jet planes, MiG-29, which Poland can afford for us. And we need a lot of long-range anti-air systems like C-400 to help to deblocate the blockade city, because we can't get out all of the people, and these people can be the next victims of the Russian terrorist war.
Indeed, I mean, a country of 40 million people, you can't take everyone out. President Biden is going to meet with refugees who are in Poland. He's going to do that, and he's also going to give this major speech in Poland, in Warsaw. What do you want to hear him say?
I understand from one side President Biden and all others European politicians, they really care about their people in their countries, and they don't want to take direct part in World War III, which really started already. But if they, you can't make an how would say, you can't avoid it. It's not about Putin start some direct war with US or with EU only if we get these planes. When he decided, he do it anyway. If you give us plane or you don't give us plane. So it's not a question. It's question about how many people lives we can we can keep. So if this help which we get next days, if we get it earlier, it's less people lives we lose.
Indeed, I think everyone who's watching right now agrees with you. Mariupol City Council member Maxim Borodin, thank you so much. God bless you and in your country. Cheers. Up next, when it comes to his wife's role in the plot to overturn the 2020 election, what did Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas know, and when did he know it? We'll be right back.
New skin growths, have had cancer, or if you need a vaccine.
Must resign, which seems a little bit improbable. But the flip side is if it was a Republican Senate, would they be so hard on Clarence Thomas?
Well, I think that, you know, to be honest with you, there has always been a kind of special pleading that applies to Justice Thomas. There has always been a kind of special loathing for him among liberal Democrats, and this goes all the way back to his confirmation hearings, at which time, by the way, he was married to Virginia Thomas, and she was already a political operative. It was very well understood when, you know, Joe Biden was running his confirmation hearings. So there has always been, you know, a kind of a special antipathy for him that, even though I am way, way on the left, I have never felt comfortable with, and I do think that there is a kind of special pleading about him that is, I find to be very uncomfortable because it is hard to resist the conclusion that it is in part because he is a black conservative, and there, you know, that does make some people feel very uncomfortable, and their discomfort makes me feel uncomfortable.
Well, we're glad you're here despite your discomfort. Ian, good to see you, my friend. Thank you.
You too. See you later.
Miami Beach moved in as planned at midnight to clear out.
There was a good piece by Elliot Ackerman in The Atlantic from Kiev talking to people who were actually doing the fighting. And they made 3 key points. First, we may be leaving the tank era. The anti-tank weapons now are very powerful at destroying tanks in the way they didn't used to be, and Russia is a tank-based military. Second, apparently the Russian tactics, they're not a learning organization the way we thought they were. They're so top-down. The commanders on the ground and even the soldiers on the ground don't have the choice to make choices, to adapt to circumstances. So they go from A to B, and it's very easy for the Ukrainians to raid them. And then finally, morale. There's that famous Napoleon saying that morale is to the physical as 3 to 1. And it's pretty clear by now the Ukrainians have pretty high morale. So like I said last week, it's time to trust the policy. And we've been ramping it up, but you look at what the Russians said today, which you talked about earlier in the program, who knows where that will lead. But it certainly seems like a plausible out to me if they want to take that out, you know, do what they used to say we should have done in Vietnam, which is declare victory and go home.
Well, it's hard to be patient when we're watching these kinds of pictures, these stories that we're hearing. I do want to ask you both about how President Biden himself is doing. And Jonathan, there was a poll out today, the respected Ann Selzer, a Grinnell College poll. It shows disapproval, 48% by 11 points. People disapprove of his handling compared to 37% approve. But when you ask people, what about the specifics of the administration's policy, namely, should we be sending armed forces? 70% say no, that's the president's policy. Should we provide weapons? 72% say yes, that's the president's policy. Enforce the no-fly zone? 52%, small majority, say no, that's the president's policy. So there is a contradiction. Right. What do we make of all this?
So this is what drives me crazy about public opinion polls, which go beyond just tell me what you think about the president's overall job approval rating. When you get into specific things like how's he doing with the war, folks aren't following the war and specific policy things like we are. So I discount, you know, how are you handling the war? What is more important are the specifics that you just pointed out, asking specific questions, troops, weapons, and other things. And it shows that the American people are with the president, and the president has his finger on the pulse of where the American people want to be with, on the war with Ukraine. And all of this will change if Putin does the unthinkable, chemical weapons or use a nuclear device.
All bets are off if that happens.
Yeah, my view is if you ask the American people, what do you think of President Biden's policy toward beautiful sunsets? 85% of American people say, no, I really disapprove of President Biden's policy toward beautiful sunsets. You know, we live in a partisan era.
Yeah.
And you attach the name Biden or Trump or Republican or Democrat to anything, and you get instant opposition. So it's nothing more than a measure of partisanship. The question is, if we were really in trouble, as Jonathan mentioned, something we get to next step in this war, could we unify? After 9/11, if I'm remembering this correctly, George W. Bush's approval rating was like 92%. It was something insanely high. Could we ever imagine that again? It's very hard to imagine that, and that means we're just not as resilient a country as we were when you could get beyond party labels.
But it is notable that there's agreement with the policy, just as you say, not when you attach President Biden's name to it. The Supreme Court confirmation hearings this week, it was almost, Jonathan, a tale of two. It was as if two nominees were sitting there. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, to listen to the Democratic senators, you would think this was a supremely qualified woman who'd served for almost a decade in the federal courts. To listen to Republicans, she's soft on crime. She tends to give lenient sentences to people who've engaged in child abuse. What did you make of the senators, of the process of the nominee?
How much time do we have, Judy? I know we don't have a lot of time. It was as if we were watching, yes, the Supreme Court nomination hearings of Ketanji Brown Jackson, but also a relitigation of the Supreme Court confirmation hearings for Justice Kavanaugh on one level. Democrats doing their level best to remind people of just how qualified Judge Brown Jackson is, how qualified, beyond qualified she is to serve on the high court. And the Republicans did everything they could to tear her down, belittle her experience, call her everything but a child of God, telling a mother that she is not just soft on crime, but is fine with people peddling in child pornography. It was just appalling. And I think that what Senator Booker, who is even more loquacious than I am, his oration that made her cry, I would have cried if my in-laws and my mother weren't also sitting in the living room as we watched this. When I saw her wiping away the tears, I felt that in my bones because I understood where that emotion was coming from. You know, in the Black community, we call everyone brother and sister, that brother over there, that sister over there. And it really wasn't until watching that I really understood what that meant. I'm about 3 years older than Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. I'm an only child. I don't know her. I've never met her. But watching her sit there, as we're looking at that picture right now, I felt as if I was watching a relative go through hell. And to have Senator Booker remind her, but remind the country of why she's there, how hard she worked, how qualified she is, and to not let anyone rob her of her joy, how important that was. She loves her country. She's interviewing for a job she's always wanted, and yet we had people there just trashing her in ways. We work so hard as African Americans to get to these spots and to stay in these spots, and to have to jump through these hoops and be questioned by people who aren't even at our level, but yet that's what we have to do to get in the tent, get a seat at the table, and then to keep that seat.
What did you make of it?
Yeah, well, moved by that.
Yeah.
You know, we have a group of Republican senators who are not really senators. They're cable TV hosts. And they use these hearings as an occasion to drag up whatever issue is popular with Tucker. And so whether it's what is a woman or whatever it's going to be, they're going to ask her about that. They're not going to ask her about judicial philosophy. They're not going to ask about temperament. They're just going to ask about whatever the issue of the moment is. And it reached its apogee with Ted Cruz, who I spoke about nicely last week. Goes back to being a schmuck this week.
We don't remember that.
He makes a big kerfluffle and then leans back and checks out how he's doing on Twitter. It's like the perfect cycle of Narcissus. And so these are not hearings. On the child pornography issue, Andy McCarthy, who's a conservative writer for National Review, who happened to be a prosecutor for 20 years, says her position that there should not be mandatory minimums for people who simply possess some child pornography is absolutely the right position. And this is the standard position because some people they're stupid and they do something terrible, but they shouldn't get a 5-year minimum because they're not fundamentally criminals. And so this is McCarthy's case, and that's her case. But Josh Hawley treats her like she's soft on child abuse. And so that's just a distortion of the record.
Well, we let that sink in.